Today's sponsor is Squared Up. They believe IT ops dashboards aren't dead. They just need to get a whole lot smarter.
Packet pushers.
Welcome to Day 2 DevOps, where the DevOps is in the details. I'm Kyler Middleton, and on Day 2 DevOps, we explore those details and how you can learn from the mistakes of others and build a solid DevOps practice on Day 1 and beyond. With me on this journey of learning and doing is my awesome co-host, Ned Bellavance. Hi, Ned.
Hey, Kyler. Today on the show, we're talking to two amazing guests, and we cover how humor helps break the ice with anyone when you're getting into deep technical conversations, how imperfection is super relatable, and trying to be too perfect is actually not always great, and how expertise comes from mastery of the fundamentals. So don't skip those 101 courses, people. Here to talk about their wildly popular podcast, the Cloud Security Podcast, are Shilpi and Ashish. Now, Kyler and I have done a lot of podcasts, and the Cloud Security Podcast is memorable to me and Kyler because these two, they are entertaining and funny human beings. I had a great time, and I think the listeners will too.
To demonstrate that, their official titles on the podcast are Shilpi, Head of Getting Things Done and Execution Ninja, and Ashish, the original Peacock and Ideas Man, and the Lord of all things technical. This got Ned and I thinking about how humor can make things fun and by extension, help you make you a better leader. So we decided to go right to the source to find out. Please welcome Shilpi and Ashish of Cloud Security Podcast. Shilpi and Ashish, thank you so much for being on this podcast. I'm so excited to have you on. I have been listening to your podcast for years now, and it is wonderful. And Ned and I talk about this podcast a lot. And I was talking about how on Cloud Security Podcast, you use humor so effectively to, first of all, just make guests. I was on this a couple years ago, just have the best time, but also just make it an interesting podcast. And the role that humor plays in leadership and growing your business and growing your podcast. And I would just love to hear about that. So is entertainment like an intentional part of your strategy, or are you two just both naturally hilarious? Or question to both of you.
I feel like I should start with one of those videos that I said, ha ha ha. It's like
I don't think we've ever actually even asked that question. So good on you for asking.
I mean, good on you for noticing it as well. I think we just keep laughing. We don't even realize if we're doing it naturally or if it's just the way we are. But I mean, I'll let Shilpi give an answer first because she's the main head who basically drives everything and makes Cloud Security Podcast successful. So I'll let her answer this first.
I mean, to be very honest, if I were to take a step back, a lot of what's happened on Cloud Security Podcast, as much as I would love to say it was all planned, it's all kind of just happened. And like now in retrospect, I would love to say, oh yeah, we planned it all. And, it was this like big thing, but I don't think we really planned entertainment to be sort of like the main thing or like for humor to be a main thing. But I think what we realized pretty early on is like cybersecurity, like many, tech conversations can be really dry and boring. Like when you're talking about like buzzwords and this technology and all the misconfigurations. If you like strip away all the fun conversation and the banter, sometimes it can be really dry. And people want to learn stuff because cybersecurity can be a great career. People make a lot of progress, but it's like, how do you get people on that journey, but not make it dry? And I think that's where it kind of came from. And I think a lot of industries have done really well to bring humor into their industry. We kind of always say this internally that it's the same people watching the same content. So like someone who's watching like any other television show is the same person who's watching a cybersecurity content. So the person doesn't change. So why are we changing the content that, goes out to them? So I think now 5 years on, I can actually describe that's what we do. But if you asked us like 5 years ago, I don't think it was planned. It was just that we've always been content creators and we've always enjoyed content. Like Ashish and I, when we see like something that makes us laugh, we'll always go, oh, that was really great. Why did that make us laugh? Or why did we even watch that or spend, like 1 minute watching it? I think we always try to sort of switch on to that. And I think now we're a bit more conscious of it. But I think earlier on, we just wanted to create something that we enjoyed and other people would as well.
It's stressful, right? Running an InfoSec team, you're always dealing with risk. And it's like, if I make a mistake, I am personally responsible from like this company closing potentially. And that's so scary. And I think humor can really break that gridlock of stress. Sorry, Ashish, I interrupted.
No, I was gonna actually take a leaf from what you were saying earlier. I think when we first met, you had your hair colored as rainbow color from memory,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and how you were finding that makes people more approachable. I found that as a cybersecurity leader, being approachable and humor helps quite a bit in being approachable. I think when, say, there's a town hall or I guess company meeting or whatever, and you've made a presentation, you add some funny bits into it, whatever your character is. Because I think a lot of times, if you ever look at the town halls or the impression people have of what security would present, it was always used to be, hey, we've blocked these many bots or vulnerabilities, and this is what the stat looks like. This is why this team is because they have not done anything. Look at the ladder, how many vulnerabilities have not been resolved. But instead, trying to change the conversation, and I don't want to say that we are wrong in doing it because I guess cybersecurity justifies its existence in the organization by doing it. But what I found was over time, asking my team to be more approachable. And by more approachable, I meant if there's a pizza thing happening, we should be attending it, even if it's not organized by security. If there is a team hangout that's happening, we should still approach it. I think obviously humor plays a role in it. If you already naturally enjoy laughing and having a great time, which all of us do, all of us hang out with friends, but somehow in work context, we start treating them as enemies. And it's like the other side is like other side versus us. So I'm like, I just ask people to be just their natural self. And as cheesy as it sounds, like I think most people enjoy and love laughing and having a great time with people just to get to know them. So I definitely found that making security more approachable would not have been possible if that humor part was not there in, say, when we were doing our 9 to 5. And we've kind of brought that same thing over here as well, which kind of continues. And I think now when we meet people, we don't treat them as, hey, you're a DevOps person who's trying to do day two conversation. And we are a cybersecurity person who's trying to figure out how do I save this world so the company doesn't shut down. I mean, I hope that makes sense, but I definitely found that to be more relatable.
I came from the op side of things.
All right.
And so there was often an adversarial relationship between the security team and the team that I was on. And I think when you're in that formal context, you're in the office and you're having a meeting and you're trying to work out your differences, security comes across as the department of no.
Yeah.
And ops just wants to get the thing working so the devs will get off their back. When you move that out to a more fun context, whether that's going out for drinks or a meal or a team building or whatever it is, and you get outside of that formal meeting room context, now you're having fun, it loosens people up and you can have more open and honest conversations and maybe actually get some progress made. Whereas before you were just at loggerheads because of that more formal context.
100%. I think it definitely becomes more of a, to what you said, it's like you're meeting a stranger every single time. And because we're all taught to hold our position, because that's the only way security can work, is to hold your position for no, then no means no, or whatever you want to call it. I 100% agree. It becomes a more of a, it's a collaborative effort rather than an anger management session or a therapy session. That's what it turns into. Like, you guys need therapy. So many times I've gone into a conversation, you feel like, oh, some people need therapy before they come out of this.
I swear, consulting, half the time it's a technical problem and half the time it's an organizational gridlock kind of problem. And so as a consultant, you are often a therapist. I don't know how that happens, but the best consultants I've found are very amiable and non-threatening. And you don't want to say, like, you're all dumb, that's why you didn't solve it. It's just you come in and say, let's all get along. I can be the bad guy if you need a bad guy. Let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it goes with the day two conversation we're having here as well, because a lot of day two conversations is when the rubber hits the ground. And suddenly that's where it was all hunky dory before we signed up anything. Now we're signed up, someone has to do the work. That's also when people turn into very, I mean, I won't say adversarial, but they definitely, who's going to do this? Is this my job? Was it your job? I don't know if did you guys find that as well?
When you were talking earlier, Shilpi, when you were talking about you didn't have this plan for the humor of your podcast, it just kind of evolved and it happened. And I feel like a similar thing happens when you're planning out a project and then you actually have to start doing it. The way that you actually go about solving problems, the approaches you have to come up with need to be more dynamic. You need to kind of roll with the punches and discover the best way of doing something as it unfolds and having some flexibility around that. And maybe humor is a way to sort of deal with the fact that you have to be flexible and bend things a little bit and not be so rigid in your thinking.
Yeah.
Humor's a way to circumvent that a little bit.
Yeah, 100%.
And I was just going to say that I know we were making like kind of parallels between like leadership and security as well. And I feel like security and leadership both have kind of like a tricky job because we almost have to make sure that nothing like breaks down or nothing like goes wrong. And just by the nature of that responsibility, you're always the person who kind of is looking for the holes and the gaps and almost in a position where you have to inadvertently tell people that, you haven't done something correctly. Like I've been in a senior leadership position for quite a long time in my careers. And it's the same thing. Like, you're always a person, unfortunately, who has to say, oh, actually, that was not done properly. And I think security has the same challenge that when you step into a room, then a big part of your role is to look for the gaps. And I think that's where, like, the same thing with leadership and security, you do need to become like approachable. You do need to become someone, you can share a laugh with, so that, when you are sort of giving that message, it's much more easier for the next person to sort of absorb that message rather than go, oh, this is just this person who's telling me off all the time. So you have to be like, like a friend. Like when it comes from a friendly place, I think people just take it on board much more easily and it's an easier conversation. Because I came into cybersecurity mostly as part of this podcast. I've always had a career more in sort of risk management and leadership. So it was really interesting to see that, I could actually translate a lot of those skills here as well. And I could see those parallels. And yeah, like humor, approachability, like sort of talking to people just as in human being is really important because in cybersecurity, I think something that we often forget, like there's that stereotype that, you're this serious person in a hoodie who lives under the basement. And I'm like, if I look at like the four of us, neither one of us represents that. So that's also been kind of like an underlying mission for us is like cybersecurity comes in all forms. We like to have a laugh. We like to dress up. We'd like to, we're just normal people. And that's something, again, we would really want to sort of shine through everything that we do that, we're not any different. And we're not this one group of people who like have been stereotyped as well.
I think people are searching for kind of a complete existence. This is very philosophical, but I swear it relates. And we have to focus on this technical binary works or doesn't work existence so much when you're programming and troubleshooting and making system architectures. And then like you start to, if you're a little sim, your adventure of feeling like you're relating to other people and enjoying your life and laughing and having fun in an unstructured way starts to fall by the wayside. And I think we seek it out, even if we have to keep learning because this career is so demanding. We want to find humor in our personal time, in our non-structured, non-programming time. And I think that can really be something that the humans that run those technical shops are seeking.
Yeah. 100%. We always want to escape from it as well, in a way, instead of working together and making an environment which is, I guess, friendly for everyone. I'm sure the business cultures in most organizations encourages the fact that, hey, we should be more collaborative, but it kind of stops there. Apart from just the words that come out of the leader's mouth, it doesn't really mean anything. And to Ned, what you said earlier about coming from an operations and me being on the other side from a security perspective, I've always known that as a thing that sometimes people come with a preconceived idea of what security would be into a meeting as well. But then they are often surprised when they find that, oh, they laugh, they want to collaborate. I mean, for lack of a better word, it's weird. I don't even know why this is so weird. I mean, does he not know what he's talking about? Maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about.
I think you have to have a certain amount of knowledge to then make light of it or to inject some humor into it, because if you don't know something from a technical perspective, it's pretty hard to crack a good joke about it.
Oh, yeah. I would say also this part where sometimes the humor would get to the point where it breaks the ice, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, say, for example, if we are looking at a code review or we're talking about day 2 of a cloud implementation, we've got some kind of insert a C acronym over here from Gartner, and CSPM, CNAP, whatever, and now we've implemented that. We go into this conversation, suddenly people are talking about whether it's a high risk, low risk. What am I looking at? What am I working on? I definitely find that day 2 conversations where it focuses a lot more on the alert that came out was relevant or not relevant, and security is okay with a medium risk or a low risk. What does that look like? And I don't want to discount the fact that those are serious conversations and should be had in its own tone. And I'm sure all 4 of us are referring to humor in the context of breaking the ice and building a relationship so that we can all work together and hopefully come to a solution where it's, I guess, moves the business forward. I mean, that's what we're all there for. We're just trying to help you move the business forward in a way that they don't shut down tomorrow or they don't have a security bad news, for lack of a better word. And no one has to use a stick of compliance, hopefully, in their world to make it happen.
A stick of compliance. I love that. Yeah, that should be on a t-shirt.
I love someone actually said chocolate and carrot instead of carrot and a stick. And I'm like, oh, it's an interesting one, chocolate and carrot. Like, so, but then they weren't able to explain the examples. It was more like, well, chocolates are like, what can you give away for free, but without a huge risk, but would have a huge impact on the other side? Like, so your operation side, they might come like, oh, can we do this? And in your mind, you realize, oh, this is a fairly low risk and it's private or whatever. I'm just making an example here. That's totally fine. You're just giving out chocolates in the beginning. But then when it comes to like a medium or a high, you suddenly go, actually, that's a carrot situation which has a stick at the end, just in case I need it. I'm like, oh, like that analogy I came across recently. I'm like, just a good one. I'm just like, are you handing out chocolates or carrots? What are we handing out?
And sometimes you do have to eat your vegetables. That's just the way it is.
That's right. As much as we don't want you.
And security sometimes does seem like the department that wants you to eat your vegetables, like do the proper hygiene.
Yeah, it's like, have your nutritions.
Actually, I would say that the developers, because none of us are developers, right? So I can just talk smack on them. That's
well, if they're listening, they're probably going to switch off after this anyways.
Yeah, when they came across the world of cloud, it was like kids in a candy shop. Everything was chocolates and sweets. And us poor ops and security folks had to rock in and be like, yeah, you can't actually use it that way because you're going to let someone exfiltrate all of our data. So
yeah,
please don't make that bucket public.
Yep.
And adding humor to that situation is also a way to avoid or tell someone that their baby is ugly in a nice way.
Yeah. Another analogy that I came across, I guess all of us have been in the industry for a while. One example that people came up with, which I loved, was the on-premise environment was like a castle where there's only one bridge to get in, get out. Like you have a castle, it's all cornered across 4 thick walls on every side. There's only one bridge which is guarded by your firewall or whatever to get in and get out. They explained that cloud is like Disneyland. Basically, it's like multiple entries, multiple exits, but everyone wants like a VIP pass to everything as well. And you're like, actually, I mean, this is probably a reference good for people who've actually been to Disneyland. So whatever amusement park you can think of as an example, VIP pass gives you access to everything. And the only thing you can do is have those video cameras looking at everything and what everyone is doing. Is Ashish being nefarious or not? Is he trying to go on all right? They have the scanning thing. So I feel like cloud is more of an amusement park where everyone wants a VIP pass, but operations and security is trying to say, actually, you don't get VIP pass. You kind of have to pay or eat carrots for it, I guess.
Would you implement like a zero trust policy on the rides?
Well, that'd be interesting. It's like, I mean, what would be the height criteria for rides as well? Like, how much, that's the level of trust? Is that how you describe it? Like, the level of trust needs to be the minimum height requirement.
You have to have this level of encryption to ride this ride.
I mean, I can totally see that happening. It's like, oh, encryption at rest or encryption in transit? Like, sorry, Kyler is like, these guys, I'm telling you. Like...
I'm going to herd the cats through this podcast. I'm going to do it. Let's do that. So I want to talk about your persona, but also our persona. So even on this podcast, every time we say something dumb, the editor is going to edit it out. So we just sound super smart and good all the time. But of course, that's not true. We're all people. And so I was hoping to maybe hear some embarrassing stories that you've done and maybe something you learned from it. If you did learn anything, sometimes you just make a mistake and have to fix it. So if there's any stories you have about that to just relate to people, what are the stories you tell if someone makes a mistake and they're like, I'm dumb. And you're like, no, you're not. Listen to this. My personal one is I clear IPBGP'd on a call center network for, I think it was a satellite-based radio company. Good luck guessing. There's only one. And I think I bounced 150 agents off the phone at the same second. And I felt so bad about that.
Oh my God.
But like, that's how I learned. That's how I learned to read my commands extra carefully. And is there anything similar that you've done in your careers that, maybe you learned a lesson from?
Yeah. I mean, I can share mine and Shilpi can go as well after this. Mine was, before I started the podcast, I was doing a lot of, I won't say promotion. I was trying to create a community for DevSecOps. So that was a big thing. Shilpi and I were running a community down in Melbourne, Australia. And we had the largest community of DevSecOps people. We were trying to talk about, hey, DevSecOps is important, blah, blah. And one of the things that I did as a CISO at a new company was I decided, you know what? I should eat my own carrots as well. So I'm going to just talk about DevSecOps and we should get DevSecOps. I got the buy-in from the leadership. Everyone's gone, yes, we should do it. It makes sense. And I went for a SaaS tool. For people who don't know what a SaaS tool is, basically, it's called static code analysis. And the idea is that you're looking at a code, you should be able to look at the code, read it, and understand, hey, logically, can I break this? Or is there a vulnerability here that someone who's an external person can look at this and break it by accessing it somehow? And I thought that was a great place to start, because I think by then, at least till that point, DevSecOps knowledge was very theoretical, was not practical, and especially not in a leadership context, definitely not practical. And I went ahead and did that. Yeah, started implementing it. And basically day zero of implementing the SaaS tool, no one had a clue on how to use it. I'm going, what are you guys on about? Aren't you guys security people? Like, oh, you should. I'm like, well, why didn't you do it? I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And I was just like, I started looking at it and going, I had no clue, because the kind of questions that were coming from developers were around, hey, why is this Java logic in here vulnerable? Can you explain that to me? And I'm going, I did Java in university or college. And like, that was the last time I heard Java as a word. The only other time I hear Java is coffee beans. Like, that's the end of it. Like, so that was really embarrassing. I actually figured out that you should not start a DevSecOps program if you don't have a person who has that application development background, because then you're losing your developers pretty much day one. And by the way, if it's not a giveaway, the entire program flopped. The CTO was super nice, did not kind of make a big fuss about it, but he's like, hey, we should try again. I'm like, but not right away, maybe next year. I'm like, okay, we'll try next year. And the second thing I learned was SaaS is not the right way to start with developers first. The reason for this is because it's too complex of a thing for someone to understand in the beginning. What works and is universal across the board is something as simple as secret management. Everyone understands what secrets are. My username and passwords are simplest examples of it. And telling a developer, hey, guy, gal, whoever, we don't want you to have your passwords in the code repository. As simple as that. Like that, everyone understands it, everyone gets it. You implement a tool for it. That is still DevSecOps. At the same time, you are able to walk away from it knowing that, hey, I don't have to have an application security background or an application development background. Everyone in the universe, at least from a technology background, understands what username and passwords are. And no one wants to keep their passwords in their repositories. And picking them up, whether it's accidental or however they made it into a GitHub or a GitLab repository, is the easiest low-hanging fruit that I could have started off with, which is what I did the second time around, and it was successful. We added another layer of open source vulnerabilities after. Funny enough, the static code vulnerability, I still feel people should reconsider before they start with that, and they also reconsider implementing it if they don't have the right resources. That's my embarrassing story. Well, I've got a few, but I'm just going to stop with that one because I'll let Shilpi talk.
When people say, I need a dashboard, what they're really saying is, show me the data. No organization in the world has moved beyond the need to use data to make informed decisions. The challenge today is that the old way of delivering that data is slow, and views are typically static. Data today is distributed across SaaS tools, data lakes, and a whole host of other places, and it's not necessarily stored with anything resembling structure. We need next-generation tools that can cater to the reality that data comes from everywhere, and that's just what Squared Up is doing. You can find out more by going to squaredup.com for simple, awesome dashboards for total visibility.
Yeah, no, I was going to take a leaf of your book, Kyle, and go a bit philosophical here. My mistake, and this is probably something that I've kind of learned with running cloud security podcasts with Ashish. So we've never co-founded a company together. We used to have two very separate careers, and we're very different when it comes to doing things. And I think I have always been like more of a perfectionist. Like I like things to, run a certain way. I'm like more planned. And I think one of the reasons why Cloud Security Podcast, in my opinion, has been successful is that initially Ashish was very sort of boisterous in the fact that we should not be perfect. If, we're failing on things or we're stumbling or something.
That doesn't come across nice.
It would initially make me really nervous, but I think over the years I've kind of learned that, especially when you're trying to create a community and we're trying to like be relatable, the whole humor thing as well, it's also good to be like imperfect. Like you don't have to. And I think that's something we've leaned into, like, even though we've been doing the podcast now for over 5 years, it's very tempting to be very polished and, sort of everything be too perfect. I think perfection, and I've heard this from someone recently, does get in the way of good. And it kind of almost makes it feel like almost too perfect, everything's too clean. So I think even now we kind of make sure that, we're not becoming too shiny. We want to still be rough around the edges. We still want to be relatable. We still want people who are watching us to, understand that we do make mistakes. So if something doesn't go right, that's fine. And I think that has been sort of good for when we're like talking to, people who are starting a podcast new or people coming new into the community. It's very good to sort of portray the fact that, even you could be very experienced and things still don't need to be perfect. So I think consciously we try not to be, for lack of a better word, like too perfect in a sense. So I think that's been kind of my learning. Like it's okay to fail and it's okay to share your feelings. I remember a couple of years ago, I was giving a keynote and we were in Australia and it was like middle of the night because Australia time zone is shocking. For whatever reason, like technology being technology, my slide deck got deleted from where I was hosting it just right before I was going to present. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, oh, should I just pretend that it didn't happen and just like kind of wing it? But I was like, you know what? It's actually good if I share it because I'm sure this happens to other people. And this is my opportunity to like, share with people that it's okay. Like this happens to everyone. And I kind of just led the keynote by saying, look, this is what's happened. I know what I'm going to speak about, but I just wanted to share this with you because like you may have an experience down the track where you go, oh my God, what has happened? It's okay. Rubbish things happen to everyone. So I think that's kind of been my big learning. Like, it's okay to fail and it's okay to share your failings as well. And it's more important, especially when you get to a point where you have an audience, to let them know, we are not perfect. Like we still have episodes where like the audio quality is not great because we're recording in the middle of a conference. Or, we will have a live show where, the internet goes. Like this happens to the best of people. And I think often when you get successful or, you get a little bit bigger, you kind of stop showing that side of yourself because you almost feel you need to be perfect. But I think that is where we have the most opportunity to kind of show to everyone that it's okay. Like we all are humans, we fail. You can just push past those moments in your life. So yeah, I took a leaf from your page, Kyla.
I love that. I found that's really effective at work in particular. When you look up to seniors, you think they are a genius and they've always been so smart because they're so much smarter than me today.
Yeah.
But no, they're not. They're people. Everyone learns in a linear way. So like it's taken years and many mistakes for them to get to where they are. So absolutely.
And just because you've been doing something for a while doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. You still do.
Absolutely.
And you forget things constantly. I can't count how many times I've Googled something and one of the hits will be a blog post I wrote like 4 years ago on how to do a thing. And I'm like, oh, well, I knew that at some point.
I'm glad I wrote that for myself.
Yes. Blogging is just documentation for your future self.
Did you just leave a comment for yourself? Future Ned is like, Future Ned, this was a great blog. Thank you. Really helpful.
And also, future me, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I left all this tech stuff for you. I didn't have time.
Kyla, it's worse if you have 3-4 comments from yourself every year. That's when it gets worse.
Yeah, I visited this place again 3 years on, 4 years on.
I've definitely gone and looked back at old like PowerShell scripts, and there are comments from previous me or old me that's like, trust me, this does the thing. Don't try to figure it out. Because I loaded it all into my brain at some point. I figured out how all the data was going to work and how the for loop was going to figure things out. And it worked once. And I'm like, okay, just going to leave a little comment here. Trust the process.
That could be like a good movie there. That sounds like a movie script right there.
Oh, imagine a movie where someone has amnesia and they learn about themselves by reading their own old code.
Oh,
that's basically a tech version of Memento, which is an amazing movie. If you haven't seen it, it's fantastic.
Oh, really? I didn't realize there was a movie on this.
No. She's saying tech version of Memento. There's not a movie like this.
Oh, tech version of Memento. Right. I'm like, there's a tech Memento movie.
Ashish is going to be like Googling code review, like time travel movie.
Coming 2025 from all of us, Tech Memento coming up.
Oh, I love it. Tech Memento.
You heard that here first.
Yeah.
Tyler has the
with a dash of
it.
AI. You have to have AI in there. It's going to be 2025.
Totally.
Well, that'll be the website, techmemento.ai.
That's really a wonderful segue to like, you all talk to the smartest people on the planet. I'm including myself in there, hopefully. So you get exposed to all the new technologies and cool stuff. And I know you make just a great deal of effort to go to a lot of conferences and expose yourself to that stuff. So for listeners that don't have the time and money to go to all those conferences, what's coming up? Like, if I'm a new learner, what should I be investing my time in learning? What technologies? Is it all Kubernetes? Is it all AI? Like, what should I be learning?
I think I'm going to give a non-popular answer. The funny thing is this has been a year where a lot of people are talking very futuristic, right? Like compared to all the years before. Like it's always been like, new buzzwords, like it was zero trust, last year, supply chain security, something else. And this year, obviously, no guesses, prizes for guessing it's AI. I would honestly say like the fundamentals like don't change. And I think like the longer I'm in this industry, I realize like for anyone starting, like just get the fundamentals right. Like even with AI, it's not that much different. I think after we've had, all the Terminator conversations and all this, like if we strip back to, especially from a security standpoint, it is basically just the fundamentals. We still need to know where our data is, how are you securing it, what are the different like API points and all of those things. So definitely Kubernetes. I know you mentioned that, Carla. It is getting popular, and I think that's because of the AI adoption, and Kubernetes just goes hand in hand with that. But the thing is, these are all really sophisticated, complex technologies, and you can't like, and Ashish is gonna hate me. I'm known for using workout metaphors, but it's like saying, how are you gonna learn how to do a pull-up if you've never, like sort of even held a bar? Like it's kind of like one of those things. So you kind of have to know the basics. So for people who are starting off, you have to, get the basics right. You have to know how networking works, all of those things. And definitely there are different layers, and then you have to pick a lane. I think that's the other challenge right now is there's so many different things. So, you'd be tempted like, should I do AWS? Should I do Azure? Should I do GCP, Kubernetes, AI? I think start with a lane, get fairly proficient at it, and then you can layer up with other things.
The hardest part is, and I feel for people who are starting today, because the number of technologies that are available, prior to what you mentioned, is Kubernetes, the servers, serverless. You can just keep going down that rabbit hole. And I'm going to use Ned, your blog example. Someone has written a blog about everything Lambda, serverless somewhere. Someone has written something about Terraform somewhere. Someone has written something about, like, if someone was to put I guess, even a roadmap, I would probably say, even that roadmap is probably not relevant within like a 6 months, 7 months period, because suddenly it's like AI is a big new hype. Oh, I don't give a about DevOps anymore. I'm going to move on next thing. Oh, like, look at that. Now there's something else. I'm like, oh, I feel like as an industry, and I understand that, hey, I mean, we're in technology, it's always changing. There's always the next thing coming up. But there's a stat that I'll remind people, which kind of brings it home. We talk about cloud so often. We have an entire dedicated cloud security podcast. We have an entire dedicated AI cybersecurity podcast. However, I think only 25% of the world is on cloud at the moment. If you put that into perspective, because we are in that world, we feel like that is basically what's going on here. I don't even know why people are on-premise. Who are these people who are on premise as well in the first place? But when I read that stat for the first time, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, it means there's potential. So you definitely can pick that as a point. Oh, if I go into cloud, then there's potential for more in the future. But the next half to that is also the fact that once you find something that you are interested in and you realize there is potential, just double down on it. And I think to what Shilpi said, as long as you understand the fundamentals of it, like the fundamentals of cloud are still the same fundamentals that we learned for IT in general. Networking hasn't really changed. It's still like we're still trying to connect two endpoints together, whether the endpoint is a server, serverless, whatever you're going to go down the path of, it is still the same. But hey, like just give it a different name. Firewalls are called security groups and firewall something else. I mean, it's all relatable if you can, to what Shilpi was saying, if you're able to get the fundamentals right. And a lot of people still choose to ignore that because in that noise that is created with what's the next best thing, suddenly somehow forget that actually, and I think it's not really any of our fault as well, because as an industry, we remember those fundamentals, we move to the next thing and go, oh, I can understand this. I spent some more time on Kubernetes. I understand what it is because we have the foundations. But people starting today, a lot of them don't have that. They just jump into an AWS certification or an Azure certification. Suddenly I'm like, I should be getting a job. Why am I not getting a job? I'm like, I don't know. It like kind of seems like you don't really know anything apart from services names and what they do together. But I'm curious to know from you guys as well. Like, do you find that, like, is there a bigger challenge for the crowd that's trying to come into tech in general?
I think there's a lot of fear. Yeah, basically, yes. It takes so much time to build a career, and you hope that all that time is worth it because you're investing in yourself, hundreds or thousands of hours of studying and projects and work. And there's this widespread fear that AI will replace you. And I think if I was new, I would be pretty worried that AI will get there before I can. And I don't know if there's basis for that, but it's certainly something I would consider every time I think, should I spend another 100 hours learning this and studying on my nights? And I didn't have that when I started. I started 15 years ago. There was no AI that was going to come take my job. It was just like, there's people and the industry's growing. There's room for all of us. So Yeah, that's what I would be thinking as a new person. And I don't think it's founded. I think the creativity of humans will never be trumped, but
Yep.
we'll see. I'm curious what you think about that, Ned.
Yeah, I really want to harp on that point you just made about how the creativity of humans
Mm.
is not going to be trumped by AI. And that's been my experience so far. Whenever I've messed with an AI tool, the main thing I notice is it is unable to come up with original thoughts and ideas. It only knows about what it's been trained on and what it can, vacuum up from the internet. If it encounters a net new issue, it has no idea how to solve that. A human does,
Yep.
but an AI does not. And that's one of the big differentiations is humans can deal with new and novel situations that AIs will just, trip over their own feet. And the reason we can do that, to go back to your point, Shilpi, is foundations, understanding how things work, and then being able to go through the troubleshooting process of, well, I know how this should work from a lower level on up, and I can take that apart in my mind and then figure out what could potentially be going wrong or a solution around the problem. And part of what happens when you start with those foundational concepts is you also build up a bit of like a BS detector. Like when you talk to somebody else, you can tell that they're just talking out of their butt when they don't actually know the fundamentals of how something works. And like, no shade on people who want to go get certifications. I think certifications are an avenue to learning more about how something works, but it doesn't replace the hands-on keyboard, actually tinkering with things kind of time. If you want to master a technology or just be, minimally proficient at it, you can't memorize a brain dump. You actually have to go work with the technology, bump your shins on the sharp corners and go, oh, now I know why it's implemented in this way. And then when you talk to somebody else, you'll be able to pick up when they don't know that or when AI is just spouting nonsense.
Yeah, 100%.
Something that someone we've had as a guest on the podcast, Kelsey Hightower, I don't know if you guys know him, but
Oh, yeah.
very recently, I think there's been like all these conversation around AI, and like he was on a panel with Ashish, and he said something, and it kind of like, I think that was a good statement for me to hear because it kind of was a grounding moment. And I think because also he's like kind of stepped away from technology, so he's seeing the world with a very different lens at the moment because we're also within technology at the moment. You kind of become a bit siloed. And he said like, all this appreciation we have for AI, and we're so, sort of taken aback by it that it's going to change everything. We've lost appreciation for like a machine that we've had for all these years, which is our brain. So the human brain's been around for so long. We've been able to do so many things. And rather than focusing on like what we've had, we are suddenly like have shifted to like this AI, which is human created. So I definitely feel it has a lot of potential. Like we use it as well with our work as well. So I kind of always take that back as like saying that, we've been around for a long time. We've, built all these amazing things, AI being one of them. And as much as, AI is new and fascinating and it can do a lot of things, I don't think it should take away from the fact that we actually have the human brain, which still hasn't been fully mapped. So we don't even know what the full potential of the human brain is. And sorry, like I used to be, like I have studied neurology, so I've got a bit of an interest in that. But that's true. Like, we've got a very good machine within all of our heads. And I think we just have to have a little more faith in that as well. And AI is just a tool that we can use. Definitely people who don't use AI probably may be left behind a little bit. The other thing that I've heard quite recently, which I related to, is it's more people who use AI that might threaten your jobs versus AI actually threatening your job. So definitely it is a technology. Like I do encourage everyone to sort of, get your hands dirty with it, tinker around with it, because I think for a lot of things, it does make things easier. It's like having, a few assistants and all of those things. So it's like cloud or, anything else. Like it's available if it makes sense. I mean, it's not a hammer for every nail, but if it makes sense for your nail, I think you should definitely tinker with it.
That's such a wonderful place to wrap. I love that. Well, if folks want to follow you, where can they find you on the big wide internet?
So yeah, Cloud Security Podcast or AI Cybersecurity Podcast. I think either one, if you Google us. Luckily, we're easy to find now.
Are those separate podcasts or is that the new name?
Yeah, so we have two different ones. So the Cloud Security Podcast has been there for a while. AI Cybersecurity is one we started quite recently. Well, not so recent, it's been about 8 months. So, and I think that just came from the fact that we were getting a lot of audience members and CISOs asking us, like, what do we need to know about this AI cybersecurity? Like, what is the real stuff that we need to like be concerned with? So it was more sort of like, let's cut the BS and let's just talk, what is the actual concern? I guess our hope with everything we do is just to make people comfortable with emerging technology. So that was cloud and now it's AI. So, that's what we're hoping to do.
Yeah, that's our mission statement as well. Helping people get comfortable with emerging technologies, whether it's cloud, AI, and whatever comes next. Hopefully leave them not confused, but at least with some sense of direction for where they want to go next, or if they are already experiencing it, they can use it. But yeah, thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And I love that the mission statement is focused on helping people, because that's just how I frame the whole world, is like, we're just here to help people, right? If we can do that,
yes.
We've made the world better.
100%.
Thank you to our guests for appearing on Day 2 DevOps, and virtual high fives to you, dear listener, for tuning in. If you have suggestions for future shows, we would love to hear them. Hit either of us up on LinkedIn or send some feedback via packetpushers.net/follow-up. If you like engineering-oriented shows like this one, visit packetpushers.net/subscribe. All of our podcasts, newsletters, and websites are there. It's all nerdy content designed for your professional career development. Until next time, just remember that doing DevOps is awesome, and so are you.